The following presentation covers actions in the Western Theater in April 1862, immediately following the Battle of Shiloh, including reconnaissance action toward Corinth, Mississippi, and the seizure of Huntsville, Alabama. It's late afternoon, April 7, 1862. The Battle of Shiloh at Pittsburg Landing, Tennessee, is over. The United States Western Theater is presenting multiple fronts. Grant and Don Carlos Buell's armies are at Pittsburg Landing, Tennessee, where the Battle of Shiloh has just taken place. Grant is not deterred by the great battle. He wishes to press on toward Corinth, Mississippi, just 20 miles from Pittsburg Landing. One of the Union brigades at Pittsburg Landing is under General James A. Garfield, who will be President of the United States in 19 years. On April 7th, further to the west, near New Madrid, Missouri, on the Mississippi River, Union General Pope is threatening Island No. 10, a critical rebel river fortification. Meanwhile, to the east, General Ormsby Mitchel is leading a division from Nashville, Tennessee, toward Huntsville, Alabama. While Mitchel and Grant seem disjointed over a wide front, they share a common goal: control of the Tennessee River region. Earlier, Grant had secured the lower Tennessee River from the Ohio River to Pittsburg Landing, and now Mitchel is aiming to secure the section further to the east in Alabama. In addition, a critical rail line runs parallel to the Tennessee River, linking the Confederate West with the Atlantic coast. The Memphis and Charleston Railroad runs from Memphis on the Mississippi River to Corinth, Mississippi. From Corinth, the line runs through North Alabama at Huntsville, crossing the Tennessee River at Bridgeport, Alabama. The railroad then runs up to Chattanooga, Tennessee. From Chattanooga, the rail line goes south to Atlanta, Georgia, and then on to Charleston, South Carolina. We will take a closer look at Grant's army in the Pittsburg Landing, Corinth zone. We can see the Tennessee River on the right. Pittsburg Landing is the river supply station for Grant and Buell's Union forces there. Following the rebel defeat at Shiloh, Beauregard's Confederate Army of the West is withdrawing to the rail junction at Corinth, Mississippi. At Pittsburg Landing, Grant realizes that he has an opportunity. If he is decisive, he can smash Beauregard's army, secure Corinth, and also disconnect the Confederate West by rail from the Confederate East. Thus, even if Beauregard were to escape again, the loss of Corinth would mean that the rebel army of the West would be largely cut off from supply and reinforcements from the east. Evening falls on April 7th. After 2 days of bitter fighting at Shiloh, the rebels spend the evening back on the same rainy country roads they had traversed before the battle. Breckinridge's corps holds the position closest to the battlefield, watchful for further Union attack. The army spend that night in April rain. Sunrise, April 8th. Breckinridge pulls back from the battlefield, the Confederate retreat now in full. Beauregard's army moves down the muddy country road back to Corinth, from whence they originally came. Sleet and hail fall. Meanwhile, at Pittsburg Landing, Grant's army is burying the wounded on both sides. Surgeons do their work. Beauregard sends a flag of truce to Grant, asking to bury the dead. Grant responds that his men have already buried the dead on both sides. Grant is already preparing for his next move. He wants to press forward with his initial objective, the seizure of the railroad junction at Corinth, Mississippi. Western Tennessee is heavily forested in 1862. The only way to Corinth is on muddy dirt roads through the woods, the same roads the rebels are now retreating on. The paths leading out of the Shiloh battlefield are the Corinth Road here and the Eastern Corinth Road here. Let's take a wider view. The country roads from the Shiloh battlefield lead south and intersect. Further parallel paths follow in the general direction of Highway 22 as it runs toward Corinth. The modern town of Mickey, Tennessee, is a good midpoint orientation between Grant's army at Pittsburg Landing and Corinth. Another nearby town that will be referenced is Purdy, Tennessee, west of the Shiloh battlefield. A country road runs from Shiloh to this town, the Purdy Road. We will zoom back into Pittsburg Landing. On April 8th, while the dead are being buried on the Shiloh Battlefield, Grant's plan is in motion. He first needs to ensure that Beauregard is actually retreating. William Tecumseh Sherman advances a portion of his division forward. The 4th Illinois Cavalry and Hildebrand's Brigade of Ohio Infantry move down the Corinth Road. Sherman passes through abandoned rebel camps which line the road. Sherman orders the 4th Illinois Cavalry forward. The Illinois troopers spot rebel cavalry. With the enemy spotted, Sherman advances Hildebrand's Ohio Brigade forward down the dirt road. At this point, Sherman's reconnaissance force is about halfway from the Shiloh Battlefield to the modern town of Mickey's. The Ohio infantry advance. The timber clears to an open field of fallen timber. Beyond the field, rebel cavalry are spotted. So, an open field separates Sherman's men from the rebel cavalry. The 77th Ohio deploys 2 companies into the field as skirmishers, with the remainder of the regiment following behind at 100 yards. The 4th Illinois Cavalry is held back in reserve. The skirmishers engage. The rebel cavalry charges. The skirmishers break. Then the infantry line in rear also runs back to the tree line. The Illinois troopers follow in retreat. Sherman has the other Ohio regiments form into line. The 77th Ohio reforms. The rebel cavalry drives forward. Hildebrand's Ohio regiments stand in line. A volley sounds. The 4th Illinois countercharges. The rebel horsemen flee. At Fallen Timbers, William Tecumseh Sherman has just battled Nathan Bedford Forrest. Forrest rides back, wounded. Sherman advances over the open field and secures a camp beyond, finding a rebel field hospital with over 300 wounded men. The evidence is clear that the rebels are in retreat from Shiloh. Sherman returns from the skirmish field at Fallen Timbers to Pittsburg Landing. We will take a step back. More action happens on April 8th, the day after the Battle of Shiloh. Up near New Madrid, Missouri, General Pope has secured Island No. 10. Thus, another rebel fortification on the Mississippi River is lost, opening the Mississippi River to further Union gunboat penetration. The western border of Tennessee is now vulnerable to Union gunboats. The next rebel fortification is at Fort Pillow, dangerously close to Memphis. With the fall of Island No. 10, Pope's brigades there can, if necessary, be steamed up the Mississippi River and then up the Tennessee River to join Grant's army at Pittsburg Landing. Meanwhile, further up the Mississippi River at command in St. Louis, General Henry Halleck wants more intelligence about the rebel strength at Corinth before he decides if Pope will be sent against Memphis or be rerouted to Pittsburg Landing. The next day, April 9th, at St. Louis, Halleck sets off by steamboat towards Pittsburg Landing. Before his departure from St. Louis, Halleck wires Grant, "Avoid another battle, if you can, till all arrive." Thus, Grant's rapid advance to Corinth is now put on hold. He will need to wait for Halleck to arrive at Pittsburg Landing to receive further instructions. While Halleck is en route to Pittsburg Landing, General Ormsby Mitchel's division to the east is advancing. We will take a closer look at Mitchel's front. Mitchel has marched from Nashville to the vicinity of Huntsville, Alabama. We can see the Tennessee River snake across this map here. The railroad in yellow follows parallel to the river. Chattanooga, Tennessee is here. On April 11th, Mitchel secures Huntsville, Alabama. He has about 8,000 men. Mitchel reports that his men have succeeded in cutting the great artery of railroad intercommunication between the southern states. Mitchel trains Sill's brigade to Stevenson, Alabama. Between Stevenson and Bridgeport, Sill's brigade destroys a rail bridge over a creek, hampering rebel reinforcements by rail from the east. Now Bridgeport, Alabama, an important rail bridge over the Tennessee River, is vulnerable to Union seizure. Simultaneously, back at Huntsville, Mitchel sends Turkin's brigade westward toward Decatur, Alabama. Decatur, like Bridgeport, is another important rail point over the river. So, stepping back, we can appreciate the giant front that has formed in the West by April 1862. From Pope's army near Tiptonville, Tennessee, to Grant's army at Pittsburg Landing, Tennessee, to Mitchel's army at Huntsville, Alabama, the Western Front is 200 miles long. April 12th. General Halleck has arrived at Pittsburg Landing. As the highest-ranking man in the theater, Halleck now directly commands the movements of Grant, Buell, Pope, and Mitchel's armies. Let's take a continental view. April 12, 1862 is the one-year anniversary of the firing on Fort Sumter. If we look at Grant's position at Pittsburg Landing, we can see that he is at the latitude of New Bern, North Carolina. Mitchel at Huntsville is at the latitude of Jacksonville, North Carolina. So 1 year to the day after Fort Sumter's bombardment, the armies in the Western Theater have made considerable progress into the Confederacy. From this vantage point, we can see the Memphis and Charleston Railroad in yellow run from Memphis to Charleston, South Carolina. Mitchel has interrupted the line at Huntsville, cutting this east-west artery in two. Mitchel's actions complicate Beauregard's options at Corinth. The movement of Confederate reinforcements from the east is cut off, and rebel units are needed at Chattanooga to keep Mitchel in check. We will go back to the Western Theater. On April 12th, at Pittsburg Landing, Grant gets Halleck's permission to take action. We will get a closer look at the Pittsburg Landing zone. The Memphis and Charleston Railroad in yellow crosses Bear Creek here in blue near Margarum, Alabama. Iuka, Mississippi is here. Sherman at Pittsburg Landing will follow up the Tennessee River and strike against the rail bridge over Bear Creek. The bridge in 1862 was 240 feet in length. At Pittsburg Landing, Sherman has Fry's brigade and the 4th Illinois Cavalry board the river transports Tecumseh and White Cloud. They are escorted by the gunboats Tyler and Lexington, which had been in action at the Battle of Shiloh just days before. In the night of April 12th, the steamships moved the troops up the Tennessee River to Bear Creek. April 13th. Sherman disembarks at Chickasaw Landing, Alabama, across from Eastport, Mississippi. From Chickasaw Landing, Sherman will now move toward the railroad bridge over Bear Creek. The 4th Illinois Cavalry under Major Samuel Bowman presses down the road from Chickasaw, Alabama toward the railroad line. They drive out rebel pickets. The Illinois troopers arrive at the bridge. Bowman divides his regiment. One mounted platoon holds the ground at the railroad tracks. The remainder dismount and move toward the bridge. 2 platoons advance into the swamp alongside the bridge as sharpshooters, and 2 platoons advance on the bridge. Rebel guards are at the bridge. A firefight breaks out. The rebels pull back off the bridge and retire. The bridge is set on fire. Let's take a wider view. The destruction of the railroad bridge over Bear Creek further assures that Beauregard at Corinth will not receive more reinforcements from the east. Sherman returns to Chickasaw and embarks on transports to return to Pittsburg Landing. Meanwhile, on the same day at Pittsburg Landing, Halleck is continuing his reconnaissance parties deeper into the Tennessee woodlands. The paths are narrow, the forests are thick. Halleck needs to know where Beauregard's army is. Tilghman's Illinois Battalion, another unit from Sherman's division, is given orders to examine the roads leading out from the Shiloh Battlefield, noticing any presence or absence of enemy on the Corinth Road, which follows to the south, and the Purdy Road, which follows to the west. Tilghman is given orders on no account to engage the enemy, but to obtain all the information possible as to his movements. Tilghman's troopers ride out from the battlefield on the Purdy Road. After about 4 miles on the road, the Illinois troopers arrive at a crossroads. Tilghman halts his column. One road leads west to Purdy, and another route leads south to Corinth. At this point, an African-American man from a nearby farm approaches Tilghman, and he told Tilghman about the position of nearby rebel cavalry. The troopers advance further down the roads to Corinth and Purdy. Soon, they return to the Shiloh Battlefield to report that no signs of enemy pickets were found. There are likely only some cavalry on the roads to Corinth. We will slide east toward Mitchel's front in the Huntsville, Alabama zone. On April 13th, Turkin's brigade in Mitchel's division secures Decatur, Alabama. Yet another critical railroad bridge over the Tennessee River is in possession of the North. Let's zoom out for a wider vantage point. By this time, it is determined that Fort Pillow on the Mississippi River is too fortified to be successfully attacked by Union gunboats. It may be easier to secure Corinth first and then march on Memphis rather than try a risky attack against Fort Pillow. Thus, on April 15th, at Pittsburg Landing, Halleck sends an order to Pope near New Madrid, Missouri. Pope's army will not proceed down the Mississippi River toward Fort Pillow, but will redeploy by water up the Mississippi River and then into the Ohio River and then up the Tennessee River to Pittsburg Landing. On the same day, on Mitchel's front, Turkin has advanced from Decatur further west, occupying Tuscumbia, Alabama. Tuscumbia is only some 40 miles from Pittsburg Landing, and Turkin is also closing in on Corinth from the east. However, Turkin's stay in Tuscumbia is short-lived. On April 24th, at Tuscumbia, Alabama, the rebels counterattack. Turkin skirmishes with the attackers, but he pulls back to Decatur and then rejoins with Mitchel's division near Huntsville. In the west, Pope's army is en route from New Madrid to Pittsburg Landing by steamboat. Meanwhile, on the rebel side, General E. Kirby Smith has regiments garrisoning Bridgeport, Alabama, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. Thus, on the eastern portion of the Western Front, Huntsville, Alabama has become the Union staging point, while Chattanooga, Tennessee has become the rebel staging area. Chattanooga is critical for the rebels because if they lose this point, then Atlanta and even Charleston becomes vulnerable by railroad. We will zoom back to Pittsburg Landing. April 27th, McCullough's 4th Illinois Cavalry from McClernand's division advances to Old Monterey near modern Mickey, Tennessee. These Illinois troopers are about halfway between the Union Army camp at Pittsburg Landing and the objective at Corinth. At a point called Pea Ridge, the 4th Illinois scuffles with rebel pickets. The rebel pickets pull back. More local slaves inform the Federals that the rebel camp is just a few miles beyond. The next day, April 28th, General Pope, now established at Pittsburg Landing, has his cavalry also advance towards Old Monterey, near modern Mickey's. There his troopers skirmish with and chase rebel cavalry. Pope sends word to Halleck that he does not think there is any significant enemy north of Corinth. Pope wants to strike Farmington, Mississippi. He has already sent reconnaissance toward Farmington. We will slide to the east to Mitchel's front in the Huntsville region. On April 28th, Mitchel's division is in action. Southeast of Huntsville, near Woodville, Alabama, there is a small detachment of 15 men from the 10th Wisconsin guarding the rail bridge over Paint Rock River. At Woodville, an African-American man informs the Wisconsinites that a rebel attack is imminent against the bridge. 10 additional men are sent from Woodville to the Paint Rock Bridge. The bridge defenders increase from 15 to 25 men. As the day turns to night, 250 rebel cavalry arrive. The rebel troopers dismount and attack. However, 25 Wisconsinites defend the bridge for 2 hours, holding off a force 10 times their size. On the next day, April 29th, it is the Union side that attacks a bridge. To the east of Huntsville, the rail line crosses the Tennessee River at Bridgeport, Alabama. Mitchel has this critical bridge in his sights. Let's take a closer look at Bridgeport. The town is here on the west bank. The river is highlighted in blue, flowing around an island. We can see that the rail bridge over the Tennessee River here is quite substantial, spanning nearly a mile from the west side to the east side. The appropriately named Long Island is here. Bridgeport is on high ground. The Bridgeport Heights are at some 725 feet, while Long Island and the east shore of the Tennessee River are at 605 feet, so the heights at Bridgeport command the whole rail line. The LiDAR map here shows how Bridgeport is an eminence over the river crossing. Danville-Ledbetter defends the bridge with 450 Georgians. The infantry hold high ground in front of the bridge, which will lend the name Battery Hill to those heights. Ledbetter has few options. The approaching Union force is much larger than his, and his Georgians will not be able to defend the high ground without the possibility of being surrounded. Mitchel's columns appear. Ledbetter pulls his Georgians back across the bridge. Ledbetter will attempt to destroy the bridge. Union artillery fires on the retreating rebels. The rebels cross the bridge, receiving incoming Union artillery fire. Ledbetter destroys a portion of the bridge during the retreat. Ledbetter pulls back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is increasingly becoming a Confederate bastion against the Union forces in northern Alabama. By now, in late April, the leaves have returned to the thick forests of Tennessee. The long western front has made sluggish progress in April 1862. Sherman at Pittsburg Landing and Mitchel at Huntsville have made the first steps forward following the Battle of Shiloh. The Union western front is vast, but Halleck now turns his attention to Corinth, Mississippi. Beauregard has assembled his men there, and they prepare for a siege.